Stakeholder meetings for IDs shouldn't be painful, but they mostly are. And does this sound familiar? You explain why a scenario would work better in this course and they say just put in the content in this course. Now, you bring up research and their eyes glaze over. And 2 weeks later you're building a standard course again. Now, here's what I've noticed after all those years in these conversations. There are two completely different types of training requests. And if you treat them the same way, which almost every ID does, the conversation fails before it starts. So spot which one you're in and the whole conversation changes. So you've been in that meeting, you asked the right questions, and you still ended up building something you know you won't work. And why? The obvious answer is, my stakeholder doesn't listen. The obvious fix, you push harder, give better arguments, deliver more feedback. And you tried it. You framed it around learning outcomes, you showed what works. The stakeholder nodded and said, sounds great, and then just make sure all the content is in there. Now, you sat on your desk and you thought, maybe I'm not just so good at this part. I can build a thing, I know I can make something better, but I can't seem to get this through. Now, maybe I'm not asking the right questions. And you're right, but not in the way you think. The problem is not your ability to convince people, but you're skipping one step. And that step determines everything that comes after it. So let me show what that step is. One scenario, same stakeholder, same words, two complete different problems underneath. A stakeholder walks into your meeting and says, our sales team isn't performing, we need training. And your brain starts working. Audience, sales team, problem, performance, solution, probably skills training, maybe coaching, maybe a refresher on the sales process, and you know what to do here. But wait. What if the sales team is hitting their current targets just fine? And the real reason for this meeting, the company just announced a new market. International clients, new regulations, a sales process that nobody has ever done before. Same stakeholders, same words, our sales team isn't performing. But there's a completely different problem underneath. In one case, people are doing something but not well enough, and in the other, people haven't done this at all. And there's no not well enough, and there's no current behavior to improve. Now imagine walking into both meetings with the same questions. What content needs to go in? What does the audience already know? And first meeting you will get useful answers, existing behavior, real data, examples of what goes wrong. But in the second meeting, you'll get a content dump. A 40-page document about new regulation, process maps, everything the stakeholder can think of that is necessary. Not because they're being difficult, but because your questions didn't fit the situation. They don't know how else to answer. The first situation is called a performance gap, and the second one is called an opportunity gap. That step that you've been skipping is this, figuring out which type you're dealing with. Before you ask one single question about the training itself, let's start with the performance gap. This is what you've been building training for your entire career. Your instincts are right here. Think about the last compliance training you've built, or the time customer satisfaction scores dropped, and the manager said, our team needs to handle complaints better. You know what to do. Expected behavior, current behavior, gap, the stakeholder can answer it all. People are doing the job, but just not well enough. There's data and there's something concrete to point at. So your questions fit, your approach fits, and this is your comfort zone. But here's the question I want you to sit with. How many of the requests that land on your desk are actually performance gaps? Real ones where people are doing the thing but not just well enough. In my experience, it's maybe half, sometimes even less than that. And the rest is new systems, new regulations, new projects, situations where nobody has done the thing yet. So you walk into these meetings with the same approach, the same questions, And it's not your fault, but nobody told you that there were two types. So if performance gaps are your comfort zone, what happens when you walk into a meeting that isn't one? Think about the last time a stakeholder asked you to build a training for a new system, a new product launch, a regulation nobody has dealt with before, and you ask the usual questions. The answers felt thin and like you were getting everything and nothing at the same time. And that's the opportunity gap. People need to do something they're never done before. There's a new booking system, new compliance regulations, there's a new market, and the behavior doesn't exist yet. Then there's nothing to improve and there's also nothing to compare to. But you ask what people should be doing differently, but they're not doing it at all, so the question lands flat. You ask about content, but the stakeholder opens a folder, 40 pages of regulations and all process maps. So your question asked for content, and so the content is what you get. You ask what the audience already knows. They know almost nothing, it's entirely new for them. And that answer doesn't help you design anything. A freelance idea gets brought into her first project at a railway company. There's a new booking system and it's rolling out in 3 months. She's really excited, and this is exactly the kind of project she's good at. This me walks in and says, we need something interactive to get people up to speed, but keep it short. So she pushes for a simulation, and the SME wants a quick reference guide. They go back and forth, and the format, the length, what interactive even means, and the project stalls. And she walks out of that meeting thinking, I know a simulation is the right call here, why can't I get it through? But notice what just happened. Neither of them asked questions that matter for the situation. What do people need to be able to do for the first time, and in which context? The argument about format stops. Instead, you're both asking the same question. What does this person need to be able to do and when? From there, the right solution becomes obvious. So if you've been in those meetings feeling like you can't get through, like you have the skills but the conversation keeps sliding away from you, it wasn't you, it wasn't your fault. You had the right intention but just the wrong questions. And not because you don't know better, but nobody told you the situation needs different ones. So a performance gap, the behavior exists, but it's not good enough. An opportunity gap, the behavior doesn't exist yet. So there are two situations, two completely different conversations. And now the practical part. How do you figure out which type you're dealing with? Even when the stakeholder doesn't know the difference either. In a real meeting, nobody walks in and says, hey, I have an opportunity gap here. You're not going to hand your stakeholder a textbook before the call. So how do you figure this out? Without a need analysis and without the time they've already told you it isn't available. You have two questions, that's all you need, no more. And the first question is, what happens if we don't do this training? Listen to the answer. It tells you almost everything. If it's a performance gap, the answer is concrete. Compliance scores keep dropping, we lose more clients, the error rate goes up. Something measurable is going wrong right now. If it's an opportunity gap, the answer is vague. We might fall behind, we could miss the market, I'm not sure, but leaderships want it. So you see all vague answers. There is not a concrete damage today, just a future that isn't happening yet. So, second question. Are people already doing this but not well enough, or is this completely new for them? Most stakeholders can answer these one immediately, and that answer tells you which one you're dealing with. No framework needed, no explanation, just a normal question in a normal conversation. And if there is, what kind of problem? That's the moment you stop being the person who builds the course. That's consulting, and the difference is 2 simple questions. Next time a stakeholder says we need training, you're not going to push back or argue about format. You ask 2 questions, and within 2 minutes you know which conversation you're in. The stakeholder won't notice the conversation changed, but you will, and so will the training you build after it. So there's one shift, same meetings, but a different starting point. A performance gap or opportunity gap. 2 words, 2 questions. So I made a cheat sheet with questions and answer types about a performance gap or opportunity gap, so you can take it into your next stakeholder meeting. And the link is in the description of this video below.